Buongiorno, buon pomeriggio, e buonasera, Lazio world. Welcome to our instant reaction pod. And today we react to the news of Maurizio Sarri resigning from Lazio. Not even 24 hours after the dismal performance of Lazio Udinese, of course, dropping all 3 points in a 2-1 loss. We find ourselves here in a change, in a managerial change, in a new age for Lazio, and Caleb and I are here to discuss that, react to it, talk about where we see ourselves moving forward, and just rehashing and taking a little bit of a look back at what Sarri was able to do for this side. So, Caleb, instant reaction. How are you feeling right now, just hours after the news broke that Sarri not fired, but in fact did resign and stepping away from $5 million on what was owed to him through 2025?
Instant reaction is honestly kind of mixed feelings. I like Sarri a lot. I do like him. I respect him a lot. And I really wanted to hold on as long as we could of a caliber as coach as Sarri, because as we're seeing with names popping up, there are not many coaches out there that can kind of have the resume that he does, right? So it's gonna be difficult to replace a coach like that same caliber. At the same time, I think we all saw the writing on the wall. It seemed that Sarri just wasn't a good fit. Maybe not so much with the squad, but maybe with Otito. And I think that's maybe where the main sort of struggles stem from. And so mixed emotions, really. I know some people are celebrating on the streets. I know others are sad about it, but I would say I'm kind of in the middle of the pack of sad, but also optimistic and excited about maybe what's to come.
Yeah, I think, look, mixed emotions is probably fair. I'm probably in that boat. But I will say I'm very disappointed. This was a managerial hire that came with a lot of promise. That certainly Maurizio Sarri, for his faults, he is an accomplished manager. He is a manager that has won this league, has brought European silverware to the likes of Chelsea, and accomplished. While he didn't win a Scudetto during his time at Napoli, he certainly brought that club to global notoriety. He became, and he brought that side of the Napoli, really was a team that a lot of people fell in love with as the ultimate challengers to Juve during Juve's run and dominance in Serie A. And so while they didn't walk away with the ultimate goal, they were an incredibly good side, and Sarri certainly deserved a lot of the credit for that. And so we certainly thought that post Inzaghi leaving, and which was a shock to everybody, there was a lot of hope that that we would see bigger and better things than what it ultimately ended up being. But just taking a look back, this was a side that Sarri inherited that wasn't lighting the league on fire, and probably in terms of motivation, Inzaghi was able to get the best out of them. And, when Inzaghi left, this was a side in that 2020-2021 season that finished the year in 6th in the table. In Sarri's first season there, 21-22, slow improvement to climb to 5th, 1 spot. It was ahead of our city rivals by 1 place in the standings. And then, last year, achieving our best finish since winning the Scudetto in 99-2000. So this was a year that saw us finish 2nd in the league, and a year that, people can argue that maybe the top sides, aside from Napoli, weren't at their strongest, but, we were able to do it with a Ciro Immobile, who saw a lot of time out, and, we were able to do it in a way that had us dreaming, because we were beating top sides in the league. And certainly going into this year, where it was a promising transfer window, and we've discussed that ad nauseum, so no need to again here. There was a level of expectations, right or wrong. We were excited going into this season, and there's no question that where we sit now, 9th in the table, is unacceptable. And we can talk about blame or not, but I was just bummed out, because we all kind of expected more. And I believe, blame certainly falls on him, but not all of it. So, talk to me a little bit, Caleb. Do you think the way this kind of ended, was it the right move or not?
Well, this is an interesting situation because normally we talk about these sorts of departures as, did the front office get it right by sacking somebody? This is a situation when the coach here, Sarri, resigned. And after Inzaghi, for us to get a coach like Sarri to follow that up was super exciting, just kind of echoing what you were saying. And so will we get that caliber of coach again? Probably not. Ideally, best case scenario, we get someone that's come up, has some sort of good repertoire. But was it fair to Sarri? I'm going to go back to what Sarri said in a press conference when it was early in the season, and a lot of people were coming after Sarri's neck. It was within the first 10 games, if I'm recalling correctly. And he came out and said, basically, look, the minute I think I'm the one holding the team back, I will resign. Sarri had a belief, and some fans sort of fought him on it, that, hey, look, I think I generally doing my job well, but I think the players are coming up short for me here. That's kind of the sentiment that was revolving around that particular time. Sarri, sure enough, has resigned. And I'm just curious to know if Sarri has resigned because he says he doesn't see a potential future here that will suit him and that he can succeed in, or that he genuinely believes that he's just not the right guy.
Well, here's a quote for you, because I'm glad you bring that up, because the quote here, Alfred Pedula, who is a tremendous journalist, does probably the best job in terms of covering Lazio and particularly Sarri, came out with a quote for Sarri's final words to the squad before he left. And the translated version is, "I see you don't follow me anymore. Many things have changed since last season, so I've decided to resign. If I was the problem, then you can now try to still shake up this season." True to his words, right? He said if he believed he was the problem, and in terms of maybe the body language, the performance, the second half that we saw yesterday, he took that as a statement from the club. Ciro Immobile visibly upset yesterday, leaving the pitch, and Sarri took that as the team no longer is buying into his ways, and he felt like, so again, whatever you feel like about Sarri, he is true to his word, and he said he would step away. And one of the things I want to commend him on is, he's walking away from money. That never happens in global football anymore, right? And we are a club that if we're shackled with having to pay this man $5 million, it would have been a struggle trying to find a manager of significance that merits the type of money that we need to pay a top level manager. So kudos to Sarri for leaving in a way that at least allows us some sort of financial flexibility, but true to his word, and he felt like the side wasn't there for him. So now we look ahead and we talk about what's next. I think in all reality is that Lazio is going to be in a situation where they're going to have an interim manager, and then what happens after that, honestly, a toss-up. I think you're going to see, at least results-wise, we would love to see what's happening with Roma amidst their change, but I think you'll see at least a game plan similarly in which you have an interim manager. And when somebody's an interim, you can throw out any plans because results change everything. So you can have an interim, but if the results knock it out of the park, De Rossi, for example, I'll be honest, I really don't believe that Roma went into this with the intentions of De Rossi being their long-term manager. I thought it was a brilliant move from their front office. It's a win-win, right? They throw in a legendary figure like that, and fans are going to love it. Obviously, there was a connection with Mourinho, so it helps soften the blow a little bit. And if things go wrong, it's an easy fix. Like you go into the offseason and find somebody better. So I think Lazio will most likely take that same approach. Again, top level managers are currently managing their side. So when I think about who we're going to look at long term, and then who maybe some of the candidates are, mean, right now, names that have been tossed out, again, Alfredo Pedula is your best resource for things like this. But you talked about Tommaso Rocchi, a former Lazio. I don't know if I'd quite call him a legend, but a top scorer for Lazio. He was one of our more impressive strikers.
Six all time.
Yeah, so he's been tossed out as a potential short-term solve. Igor Tudor has been tossed out there as a potential option. Now, interesting with Tudor because he managed last at Marseille last season, and from what I've read, didn't quite get along super well with Guendouzi. So, for me, anything that gets in the way of signing Guendouzi is a no. Miroslav Klose has been linked as well. He obviously club legend, legendary figure, still very much close to the Lazio community, has spoken positively, was actively rooting for Lazio in the Bayern Lazio fixtures, was an assistant at Bayern. So in terms of his credentials, was an assistant, spent some time with their U17s, was last at the Austrian side, Rheindorf Altach. So has managed not at the highest of levels, but when you think and liken back to Simone Inzaghi's time, right? He was our Primavera, and then because of a firing of Pioli, came in, stepped in as an interim, and then ultimately found himself in a position because of Bielsa's quick exit from the club after like a week. And so, Miroslav Klose, a lot of similar connections there. And then, so just from some of those short-term names, Caleb, does anything stand out to you?
Honestly, not really. I don't think any of them are really quite inspiring.
But again, think short-term, think interim. So what do you want out of an interim? Who do you stick with who their assistant is now and write it out, or find one of these guys that maybe is a former Laziale? And I'll throw out some of the candidates for long-term.
Yeah. Short term, I think Klose would be a good, I think a very good move just in terms of perception. If the club wants some extra goodwill, it would be a smart move in my opinion. He's someone that is clearly passionate about the club, has come out and said that his best times were at Lazio, and that's a guy who was playing at Bayern Munich. So, and he's an actual legend, and he can demand some respect from the locker room. I think someone like Tomas Rocchi, like. I just don't think you can get that sort of like level of respect from the players, something like that. But someone like Klose could come in and just provide a morale boost to a team, to the side. And I think like if I'm going short term, that's probably the best option. All the rumored people, that's I think the best option.
Yeah, I look again. If I'm going to equate anything or try and take anything from what Roma does, I do think their approach post Mourinho was smart on many fronts, as I mentioned. So I think Klose would be my choice number one. Tommaso Rocchi, I would go. If you can't land Klose now, quotes out there in terms of Klose, quoted as saying if he gets the call, he'll be on the next plane to Formello. He's somebody that wants to do it. Again, you're talking about a figure that is going to be positive. It's not going to be taken negatively from the fan base, and he does have some managerial experience. So, yeah, but kind of shifting and maybe taking a look at and then once that happens, you don't know, right? Because if Lazio starts flying high and closes the season really well, then you start conversations on what that looks like long term. Of course, there needs to be a fit. There needs to be alignment in terms of tactics. What do we start doing? How do we start playing? And that gets into deeper discussions of transfer windows and making sure there is alignment, because there wasn't that with Sarri and Lotito. Now, if we look towards the long term, and some of the names I'll throw out there, maybe the names that I'll throw out are probably the ones that are more realistic. You've got your Palladino, who is managing Monza, who is having a really tremendous season by their standards. They're 10th in the table. They're 1 point behind Lazio. Managed to do a lot with a little. We've got the likes of, again, we mentioned Igor Tudor, who would both be a short-term and potential manager. You've got Vincenzo Italiano. That name's been floated around for somebody looking to make that next step. Manager currently at Fiorentina. Fiorentina playing decent football this season, currently ahead of Lazio in the table. I would say maybe the star on him has dimmed a little bit. There was probably a little bit more positivity on him as a manager the past 2 seasons. But again, somebody who is ahead of Lazio in the table with probably less than we have. You've got the popular name, the name that I've thrown out there, Sergio Conceição with Porto, who is a Laziale, has had 2 separate stints with Lazio, most notably on that squad that won the Scudetto in the late 90s, early 2000s. He has an affinity for Lazio and Rome, and obviously is depending on how this second leg, which is currently taking place right now, goes. He could be a little bit more in demand that our price that may get just prices out. But his contract is up with Porto. Obviously, has been coaching in big Champions League matches. Of those names, who suits Lazio best? Who do you want? Am I missing anybody? Is there anybody that you feel like might be out there that's better?
I'm gonna give just some just a random name that is currently without a job that could be a guy that I would generally consider this job, and Julian Lopetegui. You familiar with him?
No.
Julian Lopetegui was the infamous Spanish coach that took the Real Madrid job before the World Cup. Remember that? And they fired him right before 2018 World Cup. Remember that?
Where's he now?
Julian Lopetegui, he is jobless. He has no job, and he hasn't had a job in, I think, over 6 months now. And I'm just putting. I'm not saying he's my favorite option, but I do think he'd be a coach with the sort of experience and caliber that's at a higher standard than maybe some other people, right? So he went to Real Madrid, didn't work out in Madrid. To be fair, Madrid at that time was also sort of in a transition point. It was a weird time in 2018 for them. That was right after they had an incredible spell. He came over. It was just impossible to follow up that incredible spell they had when they won 3 straight Champions Leagues. That was following Zidane. He was the guy after Zidane. But then he went to Sevilla for 3 years. And at Sevilla, he was there for 3 years, and he had them cooking. I mean, he had them playing incredibly well. They actually even made it to the Europa League final, and they defeated Milan. I don't remember that game. They defeated Milan 3-2 in the Europa League final in 2019, I believe. I don't know if you remember that. So he actually did win a trophy with Sevilla. Limited resources, limited, compared to the money other teams are spending, Sevilla is I would say is kind of on par with Lazio. Maybe spend a little bit more, but kind of on par. And then he went to Wolves, and they had all Portuguese players. He's a Spaniard himself. That wasn't going to work ever. But he was there for about a year in the Premier League, and it's just a game not suited to the Premier League, in my opinion. Anyways, he plays a 4-3-3. It's something that a team like that we have could kind of adjust to quite quickly, just simply from with the time with Sarri and stuff. It wouldn't be too big of a difference. But I'm on the Conceição bandwagon. I do think he is the most exciting option to me. I think he might have the most potential too. But someone like Lopetegui really intrigues me as well, because this is a sort of gig that can sort of get him back on track. It's not like, a super high profile job, but it's one that he can get into Europe. It's very similar to Sevilla. I see Sevilla and Lazio very sort of on similar realms as of late. And so I think it would be a really great move for also a team that's tended to go for a lot of Spaniard players. Pedro, Gila, Romero, all these guys are also Spaniards. So yeah, it's an interesting option to throw out there.
No, that's definitely an interesting one. Before we close out, because we wanted to keep this one short, Who do you think has the most to gain from this exit? Particularly just thinking about the players. Who is there anybody you're expecting to see maybe rise up a little bit?
Oh man, I'm glad you mentioned that because I wanted to talk about this here at the end. The thing that I'm really interested about is Kamada. Kamada has been completely iced out by Sadi. Clearly, he doesn't rate him. They don't have any belief in him. Someone like Klose, who is very familiar with German football, and I'm sure is very familiar with how Frankfurt played, how they did, the accolades that Kamada received over there. It'd be really interesting if someone like Klose did come in, is familiar with what he was doing in Germany, how someone like Kamada kind of responds. It's also new life for him because for him, it's like even if I go on the pitch and have an incredible time, I do incredible. Chances are I'm still gonna not start the next game. Sadi was very clear, like I don't rate this guy, so I think Kamada absolutely has the most to gain, and I think Lazio as a club in general, because worst case scenario, say Kamada does start playing, say we get close, Kamada starts balling out. Kamada speaks German too. I mean, which is just another interesting little fact. If we don't want to keep him, all of a sudden we actually have some more leverage with him. You know what I'm saying?
Well, but he's only under one. He's a free agent either way,
right,
so
but
he's got to be
like,
convinced to stay at the club if
right.
we ever want to profit. Now, I will say, Sadi isn't the only one that didn't have faith in him. It was always very evident that the players around him. I think that's the part that's been a challenge and has been tough to want to back him because no doubt he by what we see. It would seem that he deserved more opportunities, particularly because nobody else, Luis Alberto, is not playing out of this world. But every time we have seen him in, it really makes me question because the others around him don't seem to have confidence in him. So that would insinuate that maybe he's just not clicking in training and there's something else going on. But I think Adrian Trito on YouTube has a great comment that I think is important to shout out. He says, now we're going to see the true characters of these players. And no different than really the quote as Sarri exited the team and what he said essentially is, right, if I'm the problem, let's see if I'm the problem, right? If you guys felt like you were held back and hindered, we really are going to see the mentality of this side and the character, and if they come out and because we've talked about this side lacking a mentality, and that goes back all the way to Simone's time at this squad. I'll say, for me, the player that maybe has the most to gain from this is Ciro Immobile. And my hope is that this is a critical time in his career, in that it's clearly winding down, just given his age. But I still believe he has enough to give. He's clearly not been at his best. We've talked about the misses, and he has to be better on that front, but he is a player that tends to find more and more opportunities, and he's got to get back on track. We've got Euros this summer, and by all indications, he is on the outside looking in. He is not on Spalletti's roster to be included, and so I think that in terms of players who has the most to gain, he is a player, 200 plus goals in Serie A, still marching up that all-time leaderboard. We want to see him stay in Serie A. I would love to personally see him continue to climb and maybe find himself in the top 3, 2. And I want to see him make the Euros. So he really needs to close this season out. If that can come with a tactical change. Look, he had a 26-goal season in Sarri's first year playing in a 4-3-3. But I think most of us know that a 4-3-3 does not suit him best, particularly at this phase of his career where he needs a partner with him. And that's when he operates at his best. So I think if a new manager, a shift away from the 4-3-3 can best serve Ciro Immobile, and if we can start seeing him score, give us as fans something to cheer about to close this season, I think Ciro has a lot to gain from this as well. Again, Euros coming up, climbing up the goal scoring charts would be really important. But this is a big moment. I think this is looking back. I think this is probably in the last decade plus the most pivotal off season, as we are entering a time where we've got to get the manager right. And we are at the end of a cycle with players. So we need to look at who our game changers are. That is going to require an investment. We do have that Champions League money coming in which we could spend. Unfortunately, not having qualified for Champions League next season will be tough, but that money that has come in is there to be spent now. And so we've got to find the right playmakers. We need and this is all going to depend on tactics too with the manager on those positions. But I think we need to find our next Cheetah. We need to find our next Luis Alberto. We've got to get our wing backs or whatever they end up being. What, again, all depending on tactics. Some major upgrades. So it'll be an interesting offseason. Again, overall disappointment in how it ended. But for me, I appreciated the journey. And let's not act, for those that were clear Sarri haters. We were critical. We try to be very fair on this podcast. We're never going to do anything for likes or just to spur up conversation. But he did give us things to cheer about. The dominance over Roma in the derby during his course of time was impactful. That meant something. Obviously, qualifying for Champions League, which we've only done now 2 times in 13, 14, 15 years. That is an accomplishment. We were without silverware, which is the ultimate goal, but there were moments that he gave us to cheer about. And for that, I will always be grateful. Again, a second place finish, not quite silverware. We need to do better. But those were moments of joy. So for that, I say grazie, mister. And we'll be rooting for him on his managerial journey. So for us, it is always sempre Forza Lazio.